With the character created, now we're going to rig it up in the node view. So over in the node view, right now it looks a little bit like a mess. And we're going to have a lot of nodes because we have one node per layer, plus we'll be adding in all kinds of pegs to wrap the whole thing up. And in the process of doing so, we're going to need a little more screen real estate. The good part is while we're doing this, we don't really need to see the artwork because everything is named, so we know what it's going to be as we organize it. So that will help. Going into my node view, what I need to do is I need to expand out this window. The good part is when I'm in my windows under view, we can go full screen. And if we toggle the whole program full screen, then we can make the window itself go full screen. So if, say, our layer window is active, I use Command or Control F, Command Mac Control Windows, go once, go twice, we can see now it's full screen. One more time, I go back to normal. So now over to the node view. Command or Control F, Command or Control F. Now we can see the nodes and we have a lot more room to work. What we want to do is we want to expand out our nodes so we can see what is going on. And there's a couple of ways that we can do it. I can click on the bottom node and have the program automate it. I could just manually start dragging things around, and wow, that's going to take a long time. That's a lot of layers. So what works best is I just click on one of the bottom nodes, display or write, both will work, and we have an option to expand upward on our toolbar. So if I click on expand up, it will order my nodes up. It tells me what's going to happen with it, and I can click on OK and see that now it's moved things up. So now we have a little bit more room to work. So that's helpful. I can select these. Now the drawing, that's my original sketch. I'm going to pull it down here. We're not going to be doing much with it. I just don't want to get rid of it yet. Notice it's in red because I turned off the visibility for that layer. If I click on the check mark up here, this makes it active. Also the keyboard shortcut A, the letter A as in apple, will make it active. And with that node selected, I can click the red X or deactivate. So D as in dog, and it will turn off the visibility. So A and D will quickly turn on and off the visibility for any node while you're working with it. So we have our drawing layers. They're all connected to a composite. The composite then takes and combines all that layer information together, and it goes into two outputs. We have display, which is what we see on screen, and we have the write node. Now the write node is important because this is where we can set the properties of how we want to export. Talked a little bit about this in the last video, but it's important to review it again. In the write node, I can click on movie. We'll see we have different options that we can choose at this point, so I can choose different settings if I'm so inclined. So I could choose H.264, a compressed MPEG file, and I can choose where I want it to go, or I can let it just go into my default output folder. The default name will be output. You can certainly customize it. So now if I go and choose, I can choose where I want to put it. It defaults into my frames folder. And now if we're doing a QuickTime movie, we have customized options. So then we can use the H.264 codec, or we can use ProRes, H.265. So we got a lot of options there. We can choose different options for our audio with it. So right now, this is probably, it's an okay setting for audio if we have audio on our project. If we're doing finished audio, we'd want to use 44.1 or 48. Those would be our options that we would choose for the audio if we were doing the finished audio with Harmony. Often we put placeholder audio in for timing, and then we composite it together in something like Premiere or After Effects with the finished audio. So the write node allows us, we can export images, we can export a movie file, and we can have multiple write nodes, so we can target different write nodes. It really is a very powerful option. And under the, oh, I hit the wrong button. So under the file pull-down menu, under export, you will see one of the options is render write nodes, and this is where we can choose to render out the write node. And you can set different write nodes that have different properties, so then you can target which one or ones you want to export. But that's not our big concern on this project. Our big concern right now is how to rig up this character. So I'm going to just start moving some things around. Now these connectors, these wires that are connecting it, reflect the order of how our layer stack appears. So if we take and move this down, say towards the bottom, if I exit full screen, we'll see that now if I go into my layers, head is down at the bottom. So we can change the layer order by changing how it's connected on our comp. And right now I'm going to leave the head on top, then the neck. So we'll be adjusting our layers once we get our everything configured and set. But before I do that, what I find useful is, I mean, we can move them around. Actually, yeah, we'll move them around first. So I know the head and neck are going to be kind of in the middle. We'll have the shirt over here, the hips. So I'm putting the torso items kind of in the order that I think I'll be using them. And now we need to move a few things around. So I need to get everything right on the right side, everything left on the left side. So I'm going to move my left leg over here. So I have those three. Now I have, there is my right leg, so I'll put that down there. I'm trying to kind of build it almost like a body. So we have the upper arm, lower arm, hand, and then I have lower arm, upper arm, and hand. Now one thing I can do is I can select these layers and I can order them horizontally, which I find to be useful when we're dealing with limb groups like this. So you'll notice very quickly we've started to really make sense out of what's here. Now each of the limbs, as we work with it, is going to have a series of pegs. Each individual layer is going to have a peg, which right now that we've organized everything, which I'm just going to move these over a little bit because it will be easier to select them. But I can now select everything that I have here, and we can put a peg on it. Now the nice part is we have a keyboard shortcut for that. So if I do Command or Control P, it groups everything onto a single peg, and that's not what we want. Now notice pegs are green, drawing layers are blue. So that is a distinction that we have. So I'm going to just undo that, but with all those layers selected, if I do Command or Control, Shift, and the letter P as in peg, you can see how now it added a peg to each item. Starting with the arm here. Now one thing I like to do is I like to have the pegs vertical, so it's straight off of it. It feels correct to have them, not to have them kind of, it just feels better. So when we're working with this, we need to, and I realize my left limbs are kind of backwards from what I want. So it's going to be easier if I just delete those pegs, because I want to go upper, lower foot. So then I get the correct sequencing of the layers as well. So it would be upper, lower foot like this. So when we select them, we can see that the limbs, they're not crossing. Highlight those, go horizontally, Command or Control Shift P, that works. All right, now move these over, go horizontal, Command or Control Shift P. So that now lines those up. But what we need to do is now I want a peg for the lower arm that's also going to control the hand. So if I click on this peg, it will move the lower arm and the hand. And we did this with the arm before, where we did the parent-child relationship, but we're adding in 2 more pegs. Now this time I'm selecting a single peg, so if I hit P or Command P or Command Shift P, either one will work in this regard, because otherwise if I select this and this by using Command or Control Select, so I hold down on Mac Command, Windows Control, then I can multi-select. So if I have those both selected and then Command or Control Shift P, just Command P now gives me the peg connection. But I want the naming on this. This is going to be my arm master, so I'll rename it. So I click on the little yellow dot or square next to it, and then this is my left arm master. And this is my lower arm master, but I don't feel quite the same need to rename it. Now, it's important that these 2 pegs are in alignment and these 2 pegs are in alignment, because when we set our pivot points, we'll be highlighting both at the same time and assigning the pivot point, so then they will share the same pivot point, and then that just works better while we're working on the project. So now, select this, Command P, and right here, Command P, click the yellow square, and this is going to be my left leg master. And connect that in. Now we repeat over here. So we connect the lower or the right upper arm. So now this is my right arm master. Get rid of that extra P. So by naming our layers when we worked on them, it is helping us here as we start connecting everything. So this is my right leg master. And now as we go to connect everything, we're going to just select these. I'm going to just pull that down a little bit more so I have a little more room to work on my torso. Pull that down. Select. When I kind of finish a group here, what's nice is to go into my menu for my node view, and in the menu go under Insert and choose Backdrop. Now what a backdrop does is I can now just grab that and move this collection of layers around. Now if I want to move a layer on or off, I can just simply select it and do so. But anything that I position into this layer now becomes part of that backdrop. But backdrops are a super useful technique. Now I can name this right leg, and I can give it a color. Now I can select those, click the menu, insert backdrop, and this time this will be my left leg, and give it a color. As you can see, it's a very useful way to visually organize what we have here, and it allows me to then select things significantly easier as we work on it. So left arm, and now we'll work on the right arm. And choose color. Okay, so now we have those selected. Close. All right. So we're getting there. Now we can see that I have the hips, and then I'm going to have my shirt, the neck, and the head are all part of an upper body grouping, but I'm going to keep the shirt separate, and we're going to have the head and neck together because the head and neck, I want a head master peg, so when I click on that it will move the head and neck, or I can click on just the neck or just the head. So it gives me a little bit more flexibility as I work my way through it. And you could just set it up. Now if you have a complete head with eyes, ears, nose, mouth, hair, all as separate pieces, you're probably going to put your head into its own backdrop, and more likely you're even going to put your head into its own group so that it will look just like a head group here. Then you click the little arrow, and instead of just showing me the layer, it will now show me all of the sublayers that are part of that group. So that allows you to organize your character a little bit better. So we could just go, okay, well we have these, three parts that make up the upper body, and then the arms, and then the hips and legs will make up the lower body. I mean, that's one thing that we could do as part of it, or we can so there's just how you organize the layers really is going to be kind of at some level it's a personal decision as to how you want to go about doing it. So if I grab the head, I want the neck connected to it. Now we have the shirt, and I'm going to put all of these into a single backdrop just so it's easier to select, even though they're which I forgot. I want to make one more peg on top of the head, one here, and this peg is going to be my upper body I forgot. I got used to on backdrop so I can use spaces. So then your upper body peg. So we have the upper body peg. We can leave it here. So all of these layers are part of it. Just need to move this down to make it a little bit easier to get to, but it's also going to be, upper body is going to control the arm. So if I click on the upper body peg, it will select all of these layers as a group. Now those two layers, we're just going to put them on a backdrop, so when I click on one or move it around, it moves them both. And this is going to be my lower body. Now the lower body, we need one more peg here, and then this peg is going to be my lower body peg. So if I want to choose it, but now that groups all of that nicely together, and now I drag from that peg, connecting it into each of the legs. And once we go back to our camera view where we can see the layers when we select things, it's going to be a whole lot easier to go, oh, that's how it's all working. What we now need to do, I'm just going to offset these a little bit to make it even easier. I'm just going to do Command P with nothing selected, so it inserted a peg here. This peg is going to be my master peg. Whoa. There it is. It's my master peg. The master peg controls the upper body, controls the lower body. So if I click on that, everything is selected. All right. So we'll worry about kind of the order of where things are in our composite here in a little bit. First, we're going to start checking pivot points and seeing how everything works. Time to get out of full screen view, so Command or Control F, as in Frank. All right, so now we're going to set pivot points using our Rotate Advanced Animation tool. And we have to do it to every single peg. So what I can do is I can now click on the hips. So you can see how it selected the hips. Well, I want the hips and the lower body peg to have the same pivot point. So to accomplish that, one thing that's really useful is if I want to know where a particular layer is in my layer stack, I hit O, whether I'm in the node view or layer view. So if I click on a layer, so if I click on the head. Now I forgot to mention, did turn on peg selection mode. So I clicked on his head. Now if I go over here and hold down O, or press O, it shows me I selected the head peg. So when we're going and setting our pivot points, it's going to be really important that we have peg selection mode active, and then we're navigating the node view. You don't have to move your way around trying to find a particular set of nodes you're working on. You can just deselect everything with escape, click on a layer, so now it's active. Go into the node view, hit O, we can see that is the right hand. The right hand only has one peg we're trying to set, so we'll be setting that at the wrist. So I can now just drag that over to the wrist. Now if I click on the forearm and lower arm pegs and want to set those, I can now drag that up to the elbow. Now I hit escape, hit the upper arm, hit O. You can see how it now navigated me over. Now I can select both of those. So this handy trick means both of these nodes will have the same pivot point. But it's really important that we are working in peg mode. We don't care what the pivot point is for any of our art layers. All the art layers will have a pivot point dead center. We don't care. If I click on a layer and it turns purple, we know that that's the art layer, not a peg. And we can verify that by, before we do anything, we just go into our node view and hit the letter O. So if I hit escape, click on the shirt, go over here, hit O, we can see that is the shirt. Now, when I look at the shirt and start thinking about where I want things to pivot, I probably want his upper body pivoting around his torso, like around kind of just below the belly button, so then his body can move with it. So the shirt and upper body may want to share the same peg, but they don't have to. So if I set the shirt here, that means, you know, the shirt can rotate on the body. So yeah, I think I like having them separate. Where the upper body I want to rotate here. So we'll see, you know, how we can rotate everything like that on his body. I like that. We're going to go through, if I end up with any keyframes over here, we'll be clearing those out as we work on it. Now, I can see the neck. I think I want the headmaster to rotate there. Oh, before I set that, I want the neck and head to both have that same rotation point, but the head is going to rotate based on the chin, so we can see the head does that, but if I grab the headmaster, the head and neck are moving, or if I just need to move the neck a little bit to create whatever view I'm trying to do. So upper body, headmaster, neck, shirt, head. Okay, so the upper body's been taken care of. And that arm was taken care of. Now to work this arm. Go over here. Oh, so set it at the wrist. And you can see the arms aren't layering where the upper, and so we still have some work to do in our composite to change our layer order. I mean, we could do it over here, but it's much faster and easier to do in our composite. Now I select those two layers. We set our pivot at the elbow. Arm, set at the shoulder. Okay, now hips. Oh, what do we got going here? So we're going to set the hips and lower body, both are going to, we'll just give them the same anchor point. That works. Now, if I go over to a shoe for here, so as you can see, by using O, we're never connected the shoe. Now, if I set the pivot point and then connect it, that's usually okay. But it's a good practice to always make sure that all your connections are in place before you start doing anything. So escape to deselect everything. Oh, this now gives me the next leg. So pivot for that foot. The foot should be moving around the ankle. Lower leg moves around the knee. And the upper leg and the leg master moves at the hip. So just like when we animated the arm before, we can now, okay, we got some weird stuff going on here. Happening with that. So I can select the whole leg, there we go. Don't animate with the animation tool, animate with the transform tool. And, oh, we don't have, oh, because I only clicked on that, hit B to select both. There we go. So now we can see that leg is working there. Hit B to select the whole leg. B to select the lower leg point. And to watch what is happening here, I think it's kind of nice to watch that in the node view. I can select the leg, but if I hit B, we moved up, and Shift B moves me back down. So now if I click on the lower leg, Shift B moves down, B moves up, B moves up, B moves up. Now I'm at the entire lower body peg, so we can see he can do a little jig. Select the shirt, hit B, gives me the entire upper body, so we can now move that. Now I can move his neck, move his head, B for the whole arm, so we can see that our character, it is possible to animate our character, and it looks like we might want to do some adjustments, or we just can't bend the artwork that far because it's a little too rounded. So if I use the translate tool, move that down, move the animation tool to move the pivot point back up, and now that works a little bit better for my wrist joint. So once again, you can see how we have our whole character. Oh, and we still have one peg we never set, and that's the master peg. So let's get back out of full screen. Hit B, now it selects the entire character. Go back to our transform. But before I do that, what I want to do is, if I collapse everything on the master peg, the same way we can insert keyframes that will then be on every layer, I can just hit minus and that gets rid of any keyframes that I have there. So now he's clean. And that's important so that when I set this master peg, which controls all of the character, so that I can rotate him, I can scale him down. Oh. So if I need to scale my character, hold down shift while I do it, then I can scale my character to fit my scene. So I can scale the character, I can move the character wherever I need them to be in my scene. So we have a lot of latitude once we set that master peg. So if I select here, B, lower body, B, click O, verify, yep, the master peg is now selected. So now I have my entire character selected. I can go to frame 1 and insert a keyframe. If I want to start animating, I can just simply go to the end of my timeline and function key F5 to extend out my exposure. If I expand this out, so we can see all the layers, we can see how it's all organized. Trying to do this in the layer mode of setting everything up, yes, you could do it, but it would be really hard and really time consuming to do so. But working in our node view, even though it may at first be a little bit scary because you're like, wow, that's a lot of stuff to keep track of. And yeah, it is. But it does get easier the more you do it. So we can see we have where we have the legs, where we have the arms, so we don't have crisscrossing of our different body parts. So we go, upper lower hand, upper lower hand, upper lower foot, upper lower foot. We might need to move them as groups over. It's also possible while you do this, something you can do to maybe clean it up a little bit so that your main comp isn't quite so convoluted. We can add individual composites to each one of our limb backdrops, which is kind of handy. And to do that, we can go and choose under Insert. You'll see that we have Composite as an option. Another way we can do it is just to simply hit the return key on the keyboard and then start typing what I want and see, oh, there it is, composite. Boom. Now I have a new composite. Notice this one's called Composite 1 because the other one is called Composite. So now if I take this, copy, paste it, paste it, paste it. So now we have one for each limb group. And I'll put these in. you'll find it makes things a little bit easier. Now, I may want to, I can try and drag. So let's see, where is, if I click here, okay, so that one I can try and click and drag these over to that composite, that works. But what I find is easier in this regard, we have this tool, the scissor, and I can now just slice, 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 and slice. So I cut all those connections. Now turn off the scissors, go back to just my standard pointer. And if I want to make my backdrop a little bigger so I have a little more room to work, then I can drag the foot, drag the low. Okay, and this is where I'm going to just zoom in a little bit because it's easier to grab those. And now I can decide that, okay, so my legs, if I want the legs behind the hips and everything else, so we will let the torso layers be on top, the legs behind, but the arms on top. Okay, because that's how it was before. So now I'll go grab this composite here, drag, 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 and we'll put that arm on top. Drag this composite here. Now one thing you'll see is that I can have multiple connections coming out of a drawing layer. So I can connect a drawing layer to multiple things, which would be really wonky if we ended up doing that. But there are certain things, especially effect nodes that we work with, that we will have multiple outputs. So let's see, that's an arm, so we'll put the arms on top, leg, leg, leg. And I hope you see that, well, this is a little bit more work to set these up like this. It's easier to do it if now when we order our layers here, it's easier to figure out what's going on. I know it gets a little bit confusing when you see the crisscrossing in lines. You're like, whoa, what's going on? But click on a layer and it highlights any lines or connections coming from it so you can figure out what's going on. So, oh, and well, a drawing layer can output to multiple things. I mean, if you notice, I went onto a layer on the left corner, and now suddenly it can become a matte, and it can become a matte or invert matte. So we'll look at mattes when we talk about eyes a little bit later, because mattes are really useful when we're working with the eye on a character. So we now have our different limbs organized, our layers a little bit easier to follow, I would say. And we usually just start moving things down and around a little bit more. I mean, I can just take the body over here if I don't want, and that way everything is a little bit more contained. But it's nice, the master peg, because the upper body connects to the arms. The master peg only connects to two pegs, so it's not as like convoluted when we look at it. Now we exit. So nothing has changed in our timeline in terms of the ordering. Well, some of the layers may be in a slightly different order as I restack things, but for the most part, he's aligning very similar to what was there before, but now our node view is significantly more organized. Remember, when we're animating, we collapse onto the master peg, we go on to frame 1, insert a keyframe, now we're ready to animate. If we're not going to move right away, well, then you go over however many frames. If you're going to wait, almost a second to move, then insert another keyframe, and this is where we start working. Stop motion keyframes are easier to animate your poses on, and then use tweening for small movements between things. You don't want to do big dramatic movements with tweening, because that will almost always blow up your animation. It will blow up your movement. So now I can go here, and we're going to say it takes a number of frames to move into my next pose. So I'm going to click off on it, and I want the upper body Upper body is going to bend a little bit. Going to take my leg, rotate that out. And we'll just do a little bit of basic animation. Want to rotate, shift over the hips a little bit. Oh, I did forget right here to insert full keyframe. Now I can just pull that arm down there. Pull this arm across over here so we can see there's my pose, but the head kind of, actually I don't want the head to, I want the head to be a little rotation with it. Alright, I still hate the feet, but that's a different concern. So now I have my two poses. How does he get into that pose? It looks like we'll just do subtle movement. If I want, I can turn on motion tweening, and now you can see, because it's not a lot of movement, it's going to work decently for that type of animation. And because keyframes are just position information, I can copy a keyframe and then I can snap them back here to that pose. Could even motion tween it back. So now if we hit play, we can see he does a little move. So once you verify your character can move, you're ready to start bringing on the dance and having some fun with it. Good luck and have fun.